Hello class, this is Professor Gavoor. Today we're going to cover the SM's, or the Supply Chain Pro Learning Block 2, Supply Chain Management and Procurement. This is the purchasing function. It's a very important function in most operations and supply chain management organizations. And it's not for everybody. It's like accounting isn't for everybody, purchasing isn't for everybody. I kind of believe you have to have the gene for it, and I'll explain why later. So here's the upfront pieces of these. So we're trying to look at the role of procurement in a supply chain, and it's really to identify, collaborate with suppliers to provide needed parts, raw materials, semi-finished products, and even finished products, and other related materials that are necessary to the production and delivery of goods and services. The goal is to help balance the supply and demand while creating value for the organization. In other words, they want to get the materials, those materials, the needed parts, raw materials, semi-finished products, packing materials, whatever the case may be, even finished goods if you procure finished goods from others, like Apple buys their finished goods from Foxconn. They don't make their iPhones themselves. You want to get them at the lowest possible price possible. And still maintain the same levels of quality and service coming into your factory. So if we want to have the right products in the right place at the right time, we have to have the right inventory in the right place at the right time. We have to have the right production schedule in the right place at the right time, in the right factories at the right time, in the right quantities. And backing up a step from that, we have to have, you can't do it without having the right raw packing, semi-finished goods, finished goods, components, whatever materials that you buy from other people in the right place at the right time, in the right quantities to support the manufacturing schedule, to get the right finished goods inventory in the right place at the right time in the right quantities, and therefore to have those staged to provide the customers that order goods what they need. So purchasing is a key part of this and a large part of the cost in operations. For the cost of goods sold, they're a large section of that, and so procurement is keenly watched by C-level managers, certainly the finance, the CFO, the CEO, and the supply chain chief of supply chain operations, or operations, or vice president of manufacturing, or whatever it may be called in an organization. So we want to recognize the importance of procurement, describe the process, understand the application of a weighted scorecard, or having a scorecard and then why you might want to weight it, and then list of procurement items, terms and terminology, understand the differences between buyer and supplier relationships, and define the concept of strategic sourcing, and understand the importance of total cost of ownership. Okay, this isn't the best slide. Let's fix it up a little bit. Where would we put this? Let's put that up there just for... There's some videos in some of these slides that are worth watching. So if you look at it and you watch these slides, you can... Gee whiz, I thought I fixed most of these, but that's okay. Let's just make it smaller, and that should fix it right up. There we go. Apologies. So the overview of this thing is the role of procurement is to identify, contract, collaborate with suppliers to provide needed parts, raw materials, semi-finished goods, and other items required by the firm in order for it to meet the needs of its customers in terms of goods and services. So if you're talking about athletic shoes, the cost of breakdown for sneaker manufacturing, and it's worth watching some of these YouTubes. It's 5 minutes, but depending on how much you get into this, you should watch it. 73% of the manufacturing cost is purchased raw materials and supplies. 27% of the finished goods sales price is labor, overhead, and profit. Of course, there's that intangible, how you put those raw materials, rubbers and canvas and leather and laces and grommets and whatever else you use to make shoes, the foams and all that, to put it together to create more value than the raw materials. That's your design. But look at this, 73% of the cost of manufacturing is in materials that you buy from other people. So it's important to keep, if you want to keep the cost of your sneaker down, of your athletic shoe, of your cross trainer, or whatever you want to call it, you've got to spend some time and have some good people paying attention to that 73%. The goal is to balance supply and demand always. And basically, when they say balance supply and demand, it's the soliloquy I always go into with the right products in the right place at the right time, right information in the right place at the right time, right manufacturing plan in the right place at the right time, right raw packing materials in the right place at the right time in the right quantities at the right quality. So that's really what we're talking about. Procurement is the act of acquiring. It's buying goods. You can buy services. You can buy things that you can touch, or you can, from raw materials, packing materials, semi-finished goods. You might buy your insoles for the sneaker from a third party rather than just buy the foam from them. You may buy your shoelaces from someone else. You don't make the shoelaces yourself, etc. And the role of procurement business: establish demand requirements, define initial specifications, transfer technical understanding to the suppliers, and communicate customer needs to them. That's what the business does to procurement. Procurement then conducts standardized sourcing process, performs spend analytics and benchmarking, leverages volumes and best practices, manages contracts and negotiations. They're the opposite of sales. They're the people that the salespeople deal with in other companies. If you're doing business to business, your salespeople are dealing with purchasing people in the other companies. Sometimes in retail it's called merchandisers, which are a combination of purchasing people and marketing people, but there's always someone that's paying attention to the money, the numbers, the contract details, the terms, etc. Now, here's another video that's kind of in the way here. Seems to be two of them. Let's move them out of the way. I really thought, apologies, that I'd fix some of this. So there's introduction to procurement and two introductions to procurement. You can take a look at it. But procurement versus purchasing. Procurement is a process of buying or procuring goods and services. Purchasing is the act of buying. Procurement involves more than that. It involves a planning, negotiation, administration, so if I'm buying paper clips, I can go out and, it's almost like a commodity. I can go and find the company that, whoever's selling paper clips at the best price that day and buy however many I need, and that's purchasing. If I'm talking about procurement, I'm talking about establishing longer-term relationships with my suppliers, and selecting the suppliers is as important as selecting the price. I say this, that maybe price is not the most important factor. It is the most important factor, but it's not the only factor. And if you're purchasing and all you're looking for is price, that's one thing. If you're in procurement, you're looking for price and service and a relationship that you can build on, and we'll talk more about this. The procurement department receives requirements from the MRP, the Manufacturing Resource Planning System, or other requirement systems from departments. These requirements or purchasing requisitions include specifications, quantities, and timing of the goods to be purchased. Well, they include the timing when the goods need to be used. Now, the purchasing and procurement people decide with the suppliers when to produce them, when to buy them, when to have them delivered. The closer you can have them delivered to when you need them, the less inventory you have to carry. But that's really up to the procurement people working with the suppliers to make sure that they can. The most important thing is to have the goods there when the manufacturing people need them. The second thing is to try to get them as close to there as possible. The auto industry, Ford and GM, have been brilliant at this. They receive seating for cars to tomorrow's production schedule. They get them tonight or tomorrow morning before the production day starts, and are already sequenced in the order that Ford and GM will produce the cars at that factory. So they have the beige seat, the black seat, the uh, gray colored seats, and they're all, what trim level the seat is supposed to be. Same thing for steering wheels. If you have a steering wheel supplier, car companies don't make their own steering wheels. They have their suppliers are close by to the factory and stage them on specially built racks that are delivered in trucks to the Ford or GM plant in the order that the steering wheels go by color. Is it just kind of the plastic? Is it covered steering wheel? Is it leather covered or vinyl covered? What color is it? What features? Some steering wheels have controls on them, some don't, and those are options sometimes in cars. And so those steering wheels are all put in racks in the order that they will be built in a car. So I've got a gray steering wheel covered in leather. Uh, the next one might be a black steering wheel not covered in leather. The next one might be the high trim level where it has the heated steering wheel. In case your little delicate hands get cold on a day like today, which is I think it's 10 degrees outside. So that is important. Working with the suppliers to get the goods in when you need them. So procurement involves receiving requirements from the MRP. This is your production plan, basically. The forecast we talked about last week, that turns into a production plan. The production plan is given to purchasing or procurement. Procurement turns it into a purchasing plan. And they fill in the MRP. The MRP keeps track of all this, but the MRP comes with, here's what we plan to build on what days. And all of a sudden now the purchasing people say, okay, here's what I've got in terms of parts using the bill of materials that we talked about last time. Here's what I need to order in terms of raw materials, packing materials, sub-assemblies, whatever the case may be, to support the production. So they receive the requirements from MIP versus via purchase requisitions. But I think the procurement people actually decide when to buy these things with the material planner. So it's kind of a combination of both. Sourcing or finding suitable suppliers. Well, most of the time in a stable thing, it's like every time Apple builds an iPhone or Ford builds a car, they don't go out and find a steering wheel supplier. They have a long-term relationship with them because every car needs a steering wheel. So therefore, why don't we find a supplier that we can work with and not, source it out every time we have a thing. But if we have a new product with a new thing, we could source it with our existing supplier, or we could go find another supplier depending on what it is. You want to obtain pricing and data if you're doing it for the first time. If not, if you've negotiated a contract and have an annual price, you're just writing a requisition against an existing contract. Managing requests for quotes, requests for quotation, RFQ, and requests for pricing, RFP. Request for quotation is more complicated. We'll talk about that a little bit. Request for price is just, hey, I'm buying paper clips. Give me your best price. I want to buy 10,000 paper clips. Tell me how much you're going to charge me for 10,000 paper clips. And maybe I've given you the specification of what I want. I want the small size, steel colored, or maybe I want the color, the assorted color ones, whatever the case may be. But if I'm looking for a quotation, I might be looking for this, like let's say I'm building a new car with a new kind of steering wheel that maybe just has handles instead of a round thing, like more of a race car thing. I might put in my request for quotation how I want these things delivered, the detailed product specifications, the materials I think I want them to use, the tolerances I need, the features it has to have on it, and the added value services I expect from the supplier. I expect them to have a factory near to my assembly plant. I expect them to sequence delivery every day to next day's production schedule, sorted by, arranged in the order in which I'll produce cars. I want the steering wheels that way. And I want. So the more complicated it is, the more expensive what you're buying, you're getting a request for a quotation. If I'm just buying a commodity, a thing that anybody can go to the store and kind of buy, I'm getting a request for pricing. So if you need to conduct negotiations with suppliers as necessary, what are the terms? What are the conditions? What are we going to do? How are we going to measure what we do? They call it weighted scorecard. But first of all, how are we going to measure what we do? And if some things are more important than others, you put a weight to it so that you can come up with one specified number. I don't need one number myself. I'm kind of a metric guy, and I like to see all the metrics separately. If we want to consolidate them into one overall metric, I'm okay with that. But I like to see them separately because I like to see, it's like a report card. What's your overall grade point average? Okay, great. You did 4.0. I don't need to look any further. You got a 4 point in every class you took, or you wouldn't have gotten a 4.0. Let's say you had a 3 point. Well, I want to find out now where you were good and where you were bad. You got a C in physical education, but you're an accounting major. So is that important? I wouldn't weight that very much. If you got a C in accounting, I would really look at that closely. But you got A's in accounting and you got A's in business class, and gee whiz, you got a C in accounting and you got a C in Shakespeare. Well, the weight for your major might be that I don't discount the physical education and the English class so much. If you're an English major, well, obviously the English classes should be weighed heavier, and probably physical education gets a short weight in every case except if you're a physical education major. I'm just making that up. So conduct negotiations with suppliers, create the how you plan to measure them so they know how they're going to be measured and they know what the priorities are. And then start placing purchase orders, tracking and expediting purchase orders. You're responsible for that. Let's say some natural disaster or COVID or something prevents a shipment from being delivered, or it gets hijacked or lost, which is quite possible in third world countries. Not that frequent, but it could happen. And so you might want to expedite a replacement order. Or maybe you had a blip in production and it was something that you hadn't planned for, so you need to expedite the raw materials coming in. Processing supplier invoices. They like to get paid. I can't tell you the number of a couple two, three small mom and pop entities that I was doing consulting for, and they were having a hard time getting good service from their suppliers in terms of heat treating in one case, and I forgot what it was in the other. Maybe it was bearings. And they were saying, yeah, we can't. Our production is being disrupted because we're not getting good delivery from these people, and they're not shipping things, and they're taking their sweet time about it, and we need it more rapidly. So I said, well, let me call them and talk to them. Well, I called and talked to them, and they told me, yeah, no, we would be more than willing to produce on a rigid schedule for those people if they would just pay their darn bills. They owe us so much money. And they're like, what an embarrassing thing. Then I go back and tell them, I said, well, you know why you're not getting good service? Because you don't pay the damn bill. Darn bill, sorry. I shouldn't have said damn. But sometimes an expletive adds extra emphasis in the heat of battle on the factory floor or the warehouse floor. Okay, what are we doing here? Procurement adds value. It's these videos that are causing all this trouble. And so let's put that up here. There's another video. So there's lots of videos on purchasing. Procurement can add value. It's a strategic business function in a supply chain. Like if 73% of the cost of a sneaker is on the purchase materials, well, gee whiz, you should be paying attention to it. You should be looking at the quality, cost, and delivery. QCD, quality, cost, delivery. And no matter what you talk about, this is a term I picked up from the Japanese, but these are the three big buckets that you want your products to. Are they of high quality? Am I getting them done on a timely manner and delivering them with no issues? And am I keeping the cost at a minimum? So quality, beer is better. Delivery, target is best. When you say you're going to deliver it, are you delivering it when you say you're going to deliver it? Because too late and too early, if like Walmart, you only have a 20-minute window to deliver your goods. If you come early or come late, well, if you come early, you just have to wait. If you come late, they charge you, they fine you. And then the cost, of course, is important. So purchasing contracts and awards should be based on best value rather than simply lowest price. People forget that often. Purchasing has a reputation of being cost driven. In fact, sometimes the psyche of the purchasing manager or purchasing agent is a little bit of a, especially if they have leverage over the supplier. If they're a large part of the supplier's business, their job is to turn the thumb screws until the supplier screams in pain, and then turn them twice more, which means they just keep pressuring them for price reduction. You got to watch out for that, because you can get lower prices. You can always reduce the cost. I can always pressure someone to reduce the cost. At some point, they're going to compromise quality, or they're going to compromise delivery. And quality is one way. My example here is in soap. Bar soap, we're all familiar with it. Kind of smells nice, foams up, cleans your hands, great. The main ingredient in bar soap is a commodity called tallow, which is rendered pig fat. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the saponification process. Saponification is a chemical process on the fats to turn it into soap. So tallow is the fat that they use. It's relatively cheap. Now there are grades of tallow. It's a commodity. I mean, it's a perfectly competitive market in a sense from a microeconomic standpoint. So we slaughter lots of pigs, therefore we have lots of pig fat, lots of tallow. Now, the quality of the tallow varies. You can buy A, B, C, D grade, and I'm sure it's not graded that way, but it could be. The lower the grade, the smellier it is. The more smell it is. So if I keep pressing my tallow suppliers to reduce costs, the chances are the easiest way to do it is to provide tallow that is of a lower grade, and therefore smells more. And if you ever picked up a bar of soap and said, that's a weird smell, you're probably smelling tallow. And therefore, if your soap is supposed to be, have some sort of fragrance that means something, like ocean breeze or, soft beauty bar cleaning, smells like beautiful flowers kind of thing, you use fragrance in a product to give it that. Now, the fragrance is way more expensive than a tallow. So if I save money on the tallow, but have to spend more on a fragrance to cover up the icky smell, well, that's a stupid way. The purchasing agent for tallow gets high fives, and the purchasing agent for our fragrances now gets slammed. But you want to do it in a balanced way. So the best value includes considerations of price, delivery, quality, lead time, supplier reputation, supplier reliability, and other environmental factors. Notice the first one is still price, though. Let's not fool ourselves. In the past, organizations viewed procurement with a narrow context. The function was simply to find the lowest cost and then hammer them for even lower costs. And people will do what they have to do. But if you put the supplier at risk of going out of business because you've pressured them on cost so much. Now, can I pressure someone? If I'm 50% of your business, can I pressure you for cost? Absolutely. Your 50% of your livelihood is based on my purchasing from you. But if I'm purchasing a fingernail clipping of your total business, like 0.1% of your sales, and I come in and start making demands on how I want you to do this, that, or the other thing, you now have the leverage in that relationship and say, I don't really need your business. Here's my price, take it or leave it. And you really don't. I really don't need your, if you're the purchasing guy, you don't need my business. Another case is, this is a real life story. I was sitting at my desk in a short time when I worked in purchasing for like a year and a half, and hated every minute of it, by the way. But it's not for everybody. But for some people, it's the perfect role. That's why I say you have to have the purchasing gene. Like you have to have the accounting gene. People love accounting or they don't like it. There doesn't seem to be much middle ground. So I'm sitting at the desk, and the executive vice president of operations and supply chain walks by, and He goes, I'm exasperated. I said, well, Peter, what's wrong? He goes, we just had a negotiation with Mobile Exxon, and we're buying a particular surfactant, which is an essential ingredient for a product, right? Essential chemical that defines the product. It's a cleaning product, so it's a surfactant. It cleans surfaces. And he goes, they would not acknowledge. They're dealing with Colgate-Palmolive, and we're buying this product, and they would not listen to us. They would not budge in terms of price and delivery and this, that, the other thing. He goes, and I said, well, Peter, we're a $13 billion company, not small. But Exxon is a $250 billion company, and I'm just making that up. I could probably look to see what Exxon Mobil is right now. And I said, this is an important ingredient for one of our products, but what do we buy? 10 million of that for a year? That's not even a fingernail clipping of their total business. Why should they listen to us? And he looked at me. It's like the first time he ever heard that. And I was like, oh my God. But you have to have that perspective, or else you can't. You have to know who has the leverage in the buying and selling relationship. Walmart usually has the leverage in the buying and selling relationship. They are a significant portion. Everybody that sells to Walmart can be anywhere from 20 to 60 to 70% of their business. Walmart has leverage with everybody. People don't have leverage with Walmart. It's the other way around. So you've got to know who the big gorilla is in a relationship and honor that. If you don't honor it, the big gorilla is going to make sure that you understand. So supplier relationship management is important. Initiating, maintaining, and expanding relationships with key suppliers. And when we talk about all these things other than price, we're talking about a partnership. Now, partnerships work in one way. That's the lowest common denominator in a sense. If I have a supplier relationship with someone, and I expect a high level of partnership and communication and sharing of information, and a supplier wants to operate at a significantly lower partnership level than that, the lowest one is where the relationship is. If I have a supplier that wants to operate at a very high level of partnership, but I want to operate at a much lower level where I don't want to communicate so much, I don't want to share that much information, I don't want to work with them, I don't want to collaborate with them on forecasts, well then that becomes the norm. That becomes the best you can do. You can only do as good as the lowest level of partner wants to operate. You can try to coerce and coax them, and if you're the big gorilla in the relationship, you can probably drag them reluctantly along. But if you're not the big gorilla in the relationship, you got no chance of making that happen. Okay, so let's see, where are we at here? So supplier relationship management, initiating, maintaining, and expanding relationships with key suppliers. Key suppliers can become an extension of the organization when it's done right, involved in product design, planning, and customer service. That's what everybody wants to operate at a high level of partnership. Otherwise, you end up with something lesser. So, the procurement organization. You have a director of procurement and supply. The larger the company, that could be a vice president for sure. You have somebody that does sourcing, somebody that does supply research, somebody that does procurement administration and materials management. Materials management doesn't always report to the procurement. It says director of procurement and supply. I could be the vice president of supply chain or vice president of operations. I might have a director of procurement reporting to me, and I might have a director of supply chain management. The director of supply chain management might be the person that I put materials management under, looking at warehousing. But then I might have a separate director of logistics and a separate director of quality, depending on the size of the organization. But the first three things, sourcing, supply research, procurement administration, would fall under the purchasing or procurement direct report to me. Materials management is probably so important in a larger manufacturing kind of company. I would probably have a director of inventory and materials management, and have them do all of the planning. They would be responsible for forecasting. They would be responsible for inventory planning and production planning. And then I would have customer service and logistics separately, and probably a separate quality director or manager. So here's supplier relationships. We talked about this. A vendor, a key supplier, and a business partner. And here's the three levels that you might want to look at, which level both parties want to operate at. A vendor, price is key, little differentiation between the products, low margins, little loyalty. There's no need for loyalty. It's really what you use when you buy commodities. Tallow is a commodity, for example. If I'm buying trucking services, delivery services, I need 20 trucks tomorrow to do this and 50 trucks the next day. And, so I load the trucks up and the trucks deliver my products from point A to point B. And it's a purchase service. It's not a purchase product, it's a purchase service. And you need purchasing people that are expert at negotiating and all of that as part of your team to do that negotiation. There's higher value stuff that you can do in it, but if you're just looking for the lowest cost shipping, it's a vendor relationship. A key supplier is quality, on time to specification, adding value, reducing costs, exposing, providing expertise. That's a key supplier. So for commodities, you're talking about vendors. If I take a trucking company that I want a little bit more sophistication from, those are probably key suppliers. If I want to take someone and have a relationship that's a partner relationship, well, now I expect them, listen, here I'm going to say, I'm going to give you all of my business in this area. Let's go back to automobiles, steering wheels. But I expect any innovation you come up in steering wheel design and any thing, you bring it to me first. You're my exclusive steering wheel supplier for all of General Motors or all of Ford Motor Company or all of Toyota or whatever the case may be. And I expect for that, since I'm going to now be 30% of your business or 50% of your business or maybe 100% of your business, I expect you to do some R&D for me and bring me the coolest ideas and share them with me and not anybody else. That's where you start getting into the partnership level. And I want you to work with my people together on cost reduction. I'm not going to just pressure you for cost reductions, but we're going to do it together and we're going to split the cost reductions. The split the cost reduction part, that's kind of a myth. You always say that because it makes the supplying partner feel good, but push comes to shove, you keep all the savings yourself, especially if you're involved in it. So there's always going to be savings that the partner is going to want to do on their own to beef their margin up because they know you're still going to pressure them in price. In each one of these, price is still an important thing. And, in the terms of negotiation and the concept of the invisible hand from the microeconomics days, you'll know that the purchaser wants to buy it at the lowest possible price, and the supplier wants to provide it at the largest possible price. So in there is, and that's where leverage comes in, and that's where negotiations come in to set all that. So how can you become a customer of choice? Well, people work harder and better for companies when they are emotionally engaged with them. Sure, absolutely. If you love the company and you're treated well, people want to work for you. Benefits of becoming a preferred supplier are simple. First, access to suppliers' latest technologies we talked about. Most favorable terms. Shared risk-taking and priority allocation for resources or production capacity. Longer-term benefits include higher quality, improved planning, improved product development, greater supply and support, and lower costs. All this stuff really has to be in the contract because you spend time and make sure that you deliver to a good contract and you negotiate all the, the U.S. Constitution kind of works because they put a lot of thought into it. Well, a contract is kind of the same way. If you're going to have a real partnership and everybody wants to do it, and one thing that you have to build into the partnership is predefined penalties if one party does not do what they're supposed to do, and agreed upon penalties there, or you can also have to have the divorce clause. What if one party wants to get out? What if, hey, this isn't fun anymore? The shine is off the apple. We don't love each other anymore. I want out. What are the terms and conditions? You don't want the supplier just quitting on you and you're not able to get steering wheels for a year. Because you can't just go out and get a new steering wheel supplier. They've got to probably ramp up their production to supply to you. And if you had a supplier that was doing all of yours exclusively, you probably had in the contract that you own the machinery that they use to produce your stuff. So in case they want to get out of the business, you can move your machinery to someone else. Or actually say, hey, give us the whole facility. Maybe the facility might even be either a term in a contract where you could take over the facility and have someone else come in and operate it. So this is the kinds of things you got to negotiate. The better you negotiate up front, the prenuptial agreement, the better the marriage will be, and the cleaner the divorce will be if you have to get there. And look at the two sheep. Yes, they shaved our margins a little, but they still signed the contract. Well, that's the issue, right? The other thing I want to talk about purchasing is anybody, if we're talking about a price negotiation only, anybody can quote a low price, can actually deliver anything to you. My 3-year-old grandson, we just started a company called SK for his initials, a transportation company. And he can underbid everybody on trucking. Of course, I'd be helping him do the contracts and all that, and the negotiation, the request for quotations. But the problem comes to, he has no capacity. He doesn't own a truck. So he could get all the business, but all of a sudden you say, you call up the phone number that is there and no one answers the phone and you can't get trucks. So you've got to do your due diligence to make sure that the people can do what they say they're going to do. That's where this price only is not the way to look at it. And you've got to make sure of that. I've got a case in point in that too, which we may get to later. Maybe I'll save that's the transportation story. So I'll save it for that lecture. So strategic sourcing, supplier-based consolidation. Well, you want to look at improved relationship and communication, which probably means you want less suppliers. If you have anybody, when you have kids, you'll notice that one kid is a complexity to manage. You get 2 kids, it's not twice the complexity to manage. For somehow it's like 3 or 4 times the complexity to manage. And if you get 3 kids or 4 kids, it's probably even worse. So less suppliers is generally considered better. There was a time when everybody used to believe more suppliers is better. I'd rather have 3 steering wheel suppliers than 1 steering wheel supplier, because I can pit them against each other. I can, every time I have a new design or I want to do something new, I can ask them, and we'll get the best deal and we'll get the best price, because I'll have them competing against each other for each other's part of my business. That does make sense in a certain sense, but somewhere in the 1980s, things changed. And everybody realized negotiating on price alone wasn't cutting it. Negotiating on relationships and capabilities and price all bundled into one was much better. So they pulled all their suppliers. Like this actually happened, I think, at General Motors. And I think it actually happened at Ford in the auto industry. And I know it happened at Colgate-Palmolive, and I know that it happened at Newell Rubbermaid, where I worked. All companies I worked at. Rockwell International. TRW, all these companies I worked at, all did the same kind of thing. They pulled all their suppliers together, and they basically said, look to your right, look to your left. In 3 years or 5 years, only one of you will be here. So they were going to reduce the number of suppliers they had by 2/3. So in other words, they were going to take competing. The only time you want 2 suppliers for one thing is if you're not sure who's reliable, if neither has the capacity to fulfill your needs totally. If not, it's better to have a great relationship with the supplier and build business together and work towards a common end, which is maximizing their business and maximizing your business. Still, push comes to shove, you're going to hammer them for price whenever you can. So, spending leverage. If I have fewer, focus on larger buys with fewer suppliers, I have more leverage with them. If I have 3 suppliers of which I'm 10% of their total business, I'm a certain size gorilla with them. I'm a 10% gorilla. But if I give all the business to one of them and I'm 30 to 50% of their business, I'm an 800-pound gorilla all of a sudden with them. I have the leverage in that relationship. Don't abuse it, they'll leave you. I mean, or they'll go out of business because you've hammered them too much on price. So, may improve relationships and communication process and may facilitate negotiating greater pricing discounts, expedite deliveries, and improve the overall service. So, strategic sourcing. You want to get the best practice sharing. You want to get the best cost savings. You want to increase your quality. You want to have shared specifications. You want to have your standardized pricing. You want to improve your operational efficiency. You want to have access to new technologies from that supplier, or even help them select the best suppliers of theirs to satisfy your needs and create partnerships with those suppliers. That's kind of what strategic sourcing is all about. So it's focused on total cost of ownership. You incorporate all the customer needs, organizational goals, and market conditions. You have the best get the best product, service at the best value. You want to be driven by rigorous and collaborative approach. You want decisions based on fact-based analysis and market intelligence. You know, the days of like, hey, let's go out for a big dinner and hey, by the way, I'll give you a nice gift and I'll give you all, then that's what the supplier will do and I'll give you all my business. Those days are kind of gone. You know, that relationship procurement, that quasi-bribery is gone. I think it used to be more prominent and prevalent in the early days when I started working, and it's much less now. It's a continuous process, and you can't stop. What it's not, you can't focus only on cost. Again, let's be clear. Cost is the most important part. Getting the cheapest, but also cost of getting the cheapest product or service is cost related. Ad hoc activities involving only purchasing. I can't say, hey, listen, I really like you and we have a contract, but this for the next 2 months, I'm going to go on a spot market because I can get better pricing than I can from you. You don't want to do that. Focused on beating up suppliers. Well, listen, if you're an 800-pound gorilla, you're always going to look like you're beating them up. And if that's what you're trying to get to, you've got to like really behave yourself so that you're not beating them up and taking advantage of the relationship. And not everybody is capable of doing that. And so if you have a captive supplier, Walmart put companies out of business by pressuring them on price so much. Or then learning that, okay, I have a company, I make stockings, stockings with rubber on the bottom that people wear as slippers. And the name of my company is Totes. One of the cost reductions is rather than we know you make the products overseas. Where do you make them? Korea. Okay. Rather than have them shipped from Korea to your warehouse and then sorted and delivered to our warehouse, why don't we just have the contractor that you use to make these socks to ship them from Korea directly to our warehouses? We will save money. And it's not a suggestion. It's like, this is what we're going to do. It's called a drop ship. And you reluctantly do it. Now Walmart knows exactly who your suppliers are because they're getting deliveries directly from them. So Walmart says, well, they're socks with some rubber on the bottom. And maybe you patented the tread. Maybe you've even patented the kind of rubber that they've glued to the bottom of this. Let's Walmart go and talk to that supplier directly and say, hey, why don't you come up with a design just for us, make sure that it doesn't violate any of the Totes contract, in terms of the tread pattern on the bottom or the rubber, if there's anything proprietary. Come up with a design for us and we'll buy directly from you. You'll make more money, we'll save money. You know, you take the margin of the middleman, which is what Totes was, out of the picture. Well, Totes was no longer in that business. They got just Walmarted away. So it's not, cost is still ridiculously important. Total cost of ownership. This is a good picture because, you know, this iceberg thing, the tip of the iceberg kind of thing, the purchase price is this thing that you see above the water. But then everything else you have, design drivers, specifications, the practices, the inventory levels, the internal processes of the supplier, the internal policies and procedures of both companies, the operating practices. There's quality down here. There's delivery. There's all of these other things that add to the total acquisition cost. I might get a low price, but if I don't get reliable delivery, forget it. It just doesn't work. So, like I said, my 3-year-old grandson could supply trucking services, but if you can't ever have a truck delivered to you, well, what's the good of him winning the contract if he doesn't have the equipment to do it, doesn't have the capacity to do it? So total cost of ownership takes beyond just the purchase price. It takes, you know, any repairs and maintenance you have to do, returns, upgrades, service, support, security, training, if all of that stuff is necessary. Usually for commodity, none of this stuff is necessary. You're buying tallow, you're buying a certain grade of tallow. It's almost a perfectly competitive market. You can buy that on an open market as you need. You might want to have some suppliers that you deal with more on a regular basis just because they're closer to you and can react faster, and they run a good, clean operation and never try to send you low quality or a different grade of tallow and pretend it's the same, and if you're not paying attention, you know, that kind of thing. But it's not a strategic relationship necessarily. So sourcing decision management. So procurement is often part of a make-buy team, and it's chartered to determine which items should be manufactured internally and which items should be procured from suppliers. Now, source items from within the company. In the early days of automotive, everything except the rubber products were made inside the company. Everything. The engines, the wiring harness, the glass, the upholstery, everything. As the auto industry matured, the divisions that made glass, the divisions that did seating and interior trim, the divisions that made the engines, the divisions that did the wiring harnesses, and the reason they didn't do the rubber products, I think it was primarily because Henry Ford had a good friend named Harvey Firestone, who he bought all his tires and hoses from. And, you know, vulcanizing rubber is a grungy, dirty business, so let's not get into that. Oh, and they do all the stamping of all of their sheet metal. You know, the fenders, the hoods, the roofs, the frame of the car, all that stuff. They used to make everything. It was called vertically integrated. Over time, they became a coordinator of vehicle design and assembly and less experts in making every specific little thing. They spun off a lot of those companies. Those divisions that, like Ford Glass became, I forgot what company they became, but it's no longer Ford Glass. They make glass for whoever they can sell it to. Obviously, Ford is still probably their largest client. You have companies that make seatbelts. Why do I have to worry about seatbelt design and all that? Here's where I want to get the state-of-the-art industry stuff, so I want a state-of-the-art supplier who's only focused on seatbelts. So if you're looking to buy these things, you're looking outside the company to purchase it. So you vertically disintegrate. You do these things on the outside. The first thing that people got rid of was trucking. Why do I want to own trucks for delivery and have to do fleet maintenance and hire drivers and all this? Let's just hire trucking companies that do this. That was the easiest thing in the world to do. Apt Appliance in Chicago manages their own fleet. They have their own trucks and they have their own drivers. The drivers are theirs. Maybe they lease the trucks and have the maintenance leased out. There's so many different variants of this you can do. But along comes Amazon, And while they outsource a lot of stuff, obviously they don't make anything, but they've now started their house brands. So they have suppliers making stuff just for them, their batteries, their clothing, other things. And they're vertically integrating things that you never thought they would integrate before. That just made everybody raise their eyebrows. They're bringing trucking inside the company. They're creating their own logistics company, and they're not owning the assets. They're using an Uberized version of that delivery service. So I could buy a Mercedes Sprint van. I think Amazon will probably paint it for me with Amazon colors, or give me a magnetic sticker I can put on the side of the truck that says I'm an Amazon delivery. And I've got the app on my phone, and all of a sudden it tells me, hey, go pick this up here and deliver it to there. And I'm an Amazon delivery in an Uberized model. So they're vertically integrating things that everybody else has vertically disintegrated. So they're a disruptor. The analysis of whether to make or buy products can be complex because factors are often involved. Many factors are involved. One of the factors that's often involved is the C-level executives who's already determined that we're going to outsource this, and you're going to come up with a solution that makes it cheaper. It's almost a predetermined decision. At least that's what it was when everybody was outsourcing stuff to China. Just outsource it. I know it's cheaper. They use it to bust the unions in their factories and get product cheaper. Remember, if you outsource something to Asia or China specifically, your product has to take an ocean voyage to get back to you now, instead of making it in a factory that's attached to your warehouse. So the labor costs have to be significantly less. Production costs have to be significantly less to compensate for the ocean voyage. Well, now, if you send a pen on a big shipping container, you know, the transportation costs are probably going to be pennies. But if you're selling the thing for 10 cents or 20 cents or 30 cents, a penny here or there is a huge cost increase or a huge cost decrease. So if I can save 2 cents on labor and spend half a cent more on shipping, it's a good deal for me. So analysis. So the advantage of buying from another company is that any resource that could be used to make the product can now be invested elsewhere. Furthermore, the purchased product may be of better quality, and a supplier may be able to make it more inexpensively due to economies of scale. All those things are true, but boy, oh boy, sometimes the transition can be really, really painful. Our companies generally like to make products and provide services that they consider proprietary themselves. Like, for the longest time, Boeing used to make their aircraft makers, the wing technology was the really proprietary part of an airplane. They would make that themselves. But on Dreamliner, Boeing outsourced that as well. So you've really got to look. Auto industry, auto companies should want to make the engines themselves, right? The engine is a key component of the car. But if you can have the suppliers and you have the right kind of partnerships with suppliers, you don't necessarily have to do that. That's the point. So procurement decision, make or buy. I think next week the problems associated with this are all going to be make or buy problems. And we're going to use linear cost, revenue, and profit functions. A very simple model. I call it the crazy uncle problem to actually do this. So, make or buy. Choosing between manufacturing a product in-house or purchasing it from an outside supplier. What are the factors? Cost, availability of production capacity. I mean, they got to be able to do it. You don't want my 3-year-old grandson. He could make a bid that would be cheaper than everybody else. I could ensure that, but he can't make one thing unless it's out of Legos. Strategic importance, asset utilization, labor utilization, risk management, blah, blah, blah. Proprietary process or technology. The problem if you outsource something, and this happened, I saw it happen with pens. When I worked at Newer Rubbermaid Office Products, they make Sharpie and Papermate. They were outsourcing product to China. And I'm like, well, if you have a supplier in China, first of all the technology you had is now theirs because they're building it so they know what it is. Now, they have machinery. When the machinery manufacturers aren't going to come necessarily to me anymore in the United States, where I don't own a factory that could use this thing, maybe they're going to let me know because I could influence my Chinese supplier to buy that new machine that does something cool. They're also going to go to that supplier and say, hey, why don't you buy this new machine? Now the supplier can say, yes, I could do that, and I could let the Newell Rubbermaid people know that I'm buying this machine, or I could create my own product and undersell them or catch them flat-footed. You lose. I think if you lose the manufacturing, the one thing you got to watch out for, and a lot of people don't think of that because they're only thinking about the short-term cost reductions and short-term bonus gains. A couple, 2, 3 years. They're not thinking 5, 6, 10 years down the road when all of a sudden your supplier becomes your competitor and you're a second-tier player and they become the first-tier player. Got to watch out for that. So here's a decision grid. Contribution to operational performance, low or high. Strategic importance, low or high. If it's low, you can eliminate it. You don't need it. If it's a low contribution to operational performance, but it's sort of a strategic importance to you, you want a strategic alliance with the supplier. If it's a high operational contribution to operational performance is high, but it's of low strategic value, you could consider outsourcing it. And then if it's high, you retain it. I got another way of looking at it. Just what we're going to look at next week is simple cost. Okay, so the top reasons to outsource. What do we have here? Companies really have the resource to excel in everything. You can't do everything. You just can't. And I'm not sure why this is here, but okay, it's there and it's in the way. If I could move it, I would. I can move the bigger part. Now maybe I can move this. Let's get rid of that. We don't need that. And let's move this down. Yeah, you see now how how things work. There we go. Wow, that looks really nice now. All right, in some cases, a company may outsource critical items that require specialized product development, blah, blah, blah. But here, top reasons outsource. This is what people say. Focus on core values. Trucking is not my core value if I make, shipping is not my core value if I am making automobiles. Designing and assembling automobiles is my core value. So trucking is something I could probably outsource. Access to highly skilled individuals. Ooh. Well, I gave you the example last time of, the company I worked for that had a specialized kind of gearing, and they had like 2 of the 5 experts in the world working for their company. That's a good reason not to outsource. But if those people are gone and there's this third-party manufacturer that has that expertise, I might have to go to them. Or if someone has a technology that's new and disruptive and I don't have it and I'm not willing to invest in it, that's a good reason to outsource. And number 3, which would be number 1, ability to cut costs. No one will do this if it's going to cost more. Well, maybe there's some exceptions, but really you want to do for all the other things, and if it costs more, you're dancing in the street. Improve service quality and speed of delivery. Outsourcing things halfway across the world is not going to increase your service quality and speed of delivery. It's going to slow it down. If it takes you longer to get stuff, you necessarily have to increase your inventory. So not only does your product have to take an ocean voyage, you're going to have to carry more inventory to cover yourself because you have 1/3 of the inventory in your factory, 1/3 of the inventory in the water, and 1/3 of the inventory in production across the ocean. So your inventory has just gone up. So the cost savings have to be so significant that they overcome the increase in inventory carrying costs and in transportation costs. Access to more advanced technology. If someone is only specialized on auto glass, they're going to get technology before you do. If you've outsourced to someone to make your pens, they may get advanced technology before you do now. And so you want to keep that access. You want to keep outsourcing to them. Supply planning. Well, you have the short-term material production system requirements. You have midterm planning, which is your production plan, and you have your long-term planning, which is your strategic supply plan. So you have these three levels of supply of planning that you want to look at for your supply base, and you're always working on all three at the same time. Balancing supply and demand requires integrated supply chain management, especially short-term planning and midterm planning. Long-term planning, that's something that you want to look at. What's your long-term company goals? What's your long-term, then your supply chain goals and your operations goals? And how does that translate into a strategic plan for strategic supply planning? It's that simple. People don't look at the strategy enough. They're more focused more on the short term, second on the midterm, and then once or twice a year they might look at long term planning, and it might just be a 3 or 4 year extrapolation of the short term planning and midterm planning, and that's what they call a strategic plan. But you really want to look at, I think, if the people that do it well, you want to say, how many suppliers do I have now? How many suppliers would I like to have? Where is consolidation possible? Where are suppliers I would like to nurture that do this, that, the other thing? And how do I nurture and find them and test them out? And you have time then to like run trials with certain suppliers and see if you can come up with something that works better, saves you money and increases quality and service, and then you have something going. So ideally, suppliers are involved in 3 levels of planning. This will ensure that they will be equipped to satisfy all requirements. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Suppliers need time to plan factory layouts, machinery, this stuff. Getting machinery, if they have to build a factory or refurb a factory to accommodate your needs, especially if you're going to give them a large chunk of business eventually, that doesn't happen overnight. Remember, there's a couple things that we talked about even already, and I'll hammer it home in other lectures. You have the capital budgeting, so you have to have the money freed up to do a factory expansion or a factory refurb, and or to buy new, cooler, more efficient equipment. And then you probably need, and that budget cycle is a year, so you can fast track it, but it's still going to take 3 to 6 months, even in a fast track. And then it takes you probably a year to get the factory up and fixed and running and order the machinery. Remember, this is all make to order stuff, so you got to like put the order in, you got to take delivery, you got to set it all up, you've got to do your trial runs and make sure stabilize the machinery once it's put up, and then put it into production. That's, like I said, it's a minimal, really minimum, a year to probably 2 years, somewhere in that range to do it. So you've got to think ahead of time. You can't just do that quickly. So balancing supply with demand requires integrated supply chain management. So if you look at time, master production scheduling, this is the lowest level of aggregation. All demands, you're looking at SKU, you're looking at a 4-week at a time over a 52-week year, plant operations and line level loading. Your production plan is a mid-level aggregation, so it's done by product family, and you look at your new production pipeline or new product pipeline into that. You have a 1 or 2 year horizon and monthly buckets. You're trying to look at your longer production plan. You have your production schedule, you have your midterm production plan to see, am I going to run into any capacity issues? And maybe I have to work overtime. Maybe I have to we're really getting tight. Maybe I've got to go here and say the high level aggregation of demand and new product pipeline that you're looking at, 3 to 5 year horizon, and you're starting to think about the capital expenditures. When do I need to expand? When do I need to do this? Do I want it? If I need to expand, do I want to keep it in-house? Do I want to move it out of the house, to a third party? And you look at your assets and how much more you need and how much you want. Here's another. Executing the procurement process. What are the overall responsibilities? It's responsible for the management of the whole thing, the acquisition and delivery of goods and services, as we talked about before. It does this: requirements documentation, source documentation, purchase order issued to vendor, the order is processed, the order is delivered. This is for a vendor you've already picked. So here's, I got to buy, 10,000 widgets, that fictitious product. Well, we already know the source. Maybe I have one source. Well, then it's not really a choice where I get it from. Maybe if I have two sources and I got to choose where I'm getting it from, maybe half from one, half from the other. The purchase order is issued to the vendor. I don't know why there's a truck there because it's done electronically. The order is processed by the vendor. The order is followed up if there's any questions. If there's no questions or nothing that needs managing, if everything looks clean, it goes directly to goods receipt and inventory management, or to production planning of their company, depending on what your relationship was. If they're holding inventory for you, they're not going to build the steering wheels that day. If your procurement is saying, here's what I need tomorrow, they've already got an inventory of steering wheels ready to go. But if it's, Christmas sweaters, they don't have it. They're going to build a Christmas sweaters to your specification, and they're not going to build a sweater until they get a purchase order from you. Then they're going to make your order of sweaters for you. And then invoice verification, and you pay them, they receive the payment, and the whole thing's done. That's what purchasing and procurement is responsible for. The other thing is they want to evaluate the suppliers. Most large companies have some sort of supplier evaluation. Everybody used to have their own, but now people are using ISO certification to do this, and third-party suppliers. So the more you have a good history of orders and deliveries with no issues, why do you have to inspect if the supplier's doing everything you want them to do? But if they're not, if they send defects and, every time they send an order, there's problems with it, well, you've got to then inspect every order. You've got to suspect every order. Suspect and inspect. So procurement acts as an intermediary between a company and its suppliers. So it's responsible for researching the suppliers, negotiating terms, and awarding orders. The supplier criteria uses: are they suitable to make what you want? Do they have a great reputation? Evaluation: you want to constantly evaluate quality, reliability. At the outset, you want to evaluate it, but then on an ongoing basis. Quality and reliability. At the outset, you want to evaluate size, adaptability, flexibility, and do they have the throughput? How long does it take them to do it? What's their stability? If it's a company that's about to go bankrupt, hey, I got an idea. Let's not do business with them. So they're well run and done. Where's their location? Are they domestic, offshore, near shore? How far away are they, and what are the implications on inventory and transportation that will have in the pricing? And certifications. Are they, if you have a certain industry and you want them to be certified by ISO / name of industry, are they certified? And does that certification impress you? You could have your own criteria for that, prove it to me over time. So suppliers will be entered into approved supplier database. The database features the supplier's name, location, goods, and then you can do that. I don't know how many people keep an approved supply database. I guess sometimes you're always looking for transportation suppliers, and you're always looking for, there's something in your industry that maybe you're not happy with the people you've been using for these products or these raw and packing materials, and you keep searching until you find one that you actually is a suitable partner for you. So issuing RFQs and RFPs. So you have an internal customer, you have requirement definition, you source it, you do the solicitation of the people that you want, you evaluate it, you award the contract to one or the other. Maybe you evaluate it and you reduce it from 6 to 2. And say, okay, you two are the finalists, sharpen your pencils, come back, you evaluate that, you make a decision. You should go visit them, depending on the size of the business, and make sure that they can do everything they say they're going to do. And then you award the contract and you manage the contract. So a request for quote. This is used when many inputs beyond pricing and delivery information are required. This is really kind of more, you're looking for a strategic, and you send this to multiple potential suppliers because you're looking for someone to do something. It could be for new business or it could be for an existing business. When you do it for an existing business, you're firing a shot across the bow of your current supplier and telling him that basically, sharpen your pencil, get your act together, we're expecting more from you. And usually that means if you don't drop your price, you're going to lose the business. So it's not about price, but golly gee whiz, isn't it? And the RFP, a request for pricing. So some people use it. Some people use this backwards. They call their quotation just a price, and they use the P instead of request for pricing, request for proposal, which is more than just a quotation for price. So you'll see it go both ways. For the exam, stick with this: request for quotation, request for pricing. So it's used for simple procurement in which pricing and delivery are all that you want. If I'm buying paper, if I'm buying commodities, I'm doing an RFP. If I'm buying trucking services, short-term trucking services and all kinds of other things that are commodities, RFP is what I want. If I'm doing something that's more strategic, RFQ. So when looking at multiple suppliers, buyers need to evaluate the weight. So you decide what's your scorecard, what's your criteria for making the decision. And if you need to add weights to those criteria, you do. If you don't, you don't. So purchase requisitions are generated from the MRP system and sent to buyers for processing. Well, a requisition means there's a purchase order on file already. So if I've got a supplier that I do business with and we negotiated prices for the whole year, for whatever it is I'm buying from them, I've got a blanket purchase order that covers the whole year, and not to exceed this amount and not to be less than this amount. So if you exceed that amount, you have to redo the purchase order just to make sure it's a check and balance, to make sure that someone's not using the system to cheat. And believe me, people will cheat. People will bribe your purchasing people if they can. If they have a good, close relationship with them and they can pay them, let's say, $3,000 a year. That's $36,000 more in salary. So if you're making $70,000, now you're making $106,000. You're probably making $125,000 because you're not paying taxes on the cash that you've got. On a $10 million spend, what's $36,000? Nothing. Of course, if you get caught, you get fired, and you probably don't deal with that. And the people at the supplier will get fired, if not the whole supplier themselves. But you've got to, it happens. You've got to pay attention. If something smells funny, investigate, because if it smells funny, I've come to the conclusion that there's a raging fire on the other side of the wall. Or a stinking animal, a dead animal on the other side of the wall. Whatever analogy or allegory you want for that, but you get the picture. So purchase requisitions are against a blanket purchase order. And they don't require approval. They require less approval than a purchase order. Purchase order, if I'm signing a purchase order for $30 million to some company, well, the CFO is probably going to have to sign off for it, a blanket purchase order for a whole year. And then every time I need that material, whatever it is, I would be putting a requisition against that order. So then the accounting people would have good knowledge of what's happening and where we stand on that. And it just expedites the whole thing faster. So you can look at a couple total cost of ownership videos there. The weighted scorecard, we have quoted cost, you have delivery time, you have quality, three things. And they're saying, look at cost is 50% of it, delivery time is 20%, quality is 30%, adds up to 100%. So they give them a report card, maybe a score from, in a 1 to 5 scale, or however you want to do it, 0 to 100. You give them a percentage, and you basically calculate a grade point average. I mean, is your grade point a weighted average? Yes. You have 3 credit hour classes. I mean, you have 4 credit hour classes and 2 credit hour classes, and you multiply them by the number of credit hours times the A, B, or C, and that's how you get a weighted grade point average. So, placing a purchase order. Well, you want to have definitions of freight, legal, payment, discounts, clear identification of products, what's supposed to be there, engineering drawings, sketches, etc. Level of those drawings change all the time, so you have to have a engineering release level management system probably associated with it. Shipping directions, what do you want it, how do you want it packaged, how do you want it labeled, how do you want it, all kinds of stuff. How quantities per pallets, whatever the case may be, every detail you could possibly think of, put it in a contract. And in your purchase order, which is a contract of how you're going to do. You have a contract between the 2 companies, and a purchase order is a reflection of that contract. Purchase orders are awarded after the supplier responses are scored. In some cases, additional negotiations will take place to further define pricing and the terms and conditions. The buyer will place an actual purchase order. It could be for a one-time buy, or like I said, it could be a blanket purchase order for the whole year. Here's an example of one. It's got the name of your company, and 2, who's ordering it, and who you're releasing it to, and who is getting it. So it's going to the New World company, which is the same thing here. That's who it's being shipped to, and it's got the shipping address. It's got this. You've got your item number, the quantity of each item you're buying, the part number, the description, the required date, whether it's in each, a pallet, whatever the units are, the unit price, the total price, because depend on, you multiply 10 times the unit price, the quantity times the unit price to get the price, and you add it up, you put your tax, you got your money in there. Notice there's no transportation, and maybe transportation might be included, but there might be a separate line for transportation, shipping and handling, if you will. So this is a purchase order. It used to be paper, now it's mostly electronic. Purchase order administration. Purchase orders are binding contracts, must be accurate. And any changes have to be agreed between 2. Most purchase orders and other documents are exchanged now electronically. The purchasing department tracks the progress. Well, anybody can track, anybody that needs to know. If I'm waiting in my factory for the widgets to come from supplier ABC so I can build my product XYZ, and I'm the production manager, or I'm the materials resource planner for that factory, I should be able to look and see where that shipment status is too. It's not a need to know, but the person that's most responsible for the direct relationship with the supplier is the purchasing department. Now it's the purchasing department, it's not procurement department anymore. Buyers and procurement specialists ensure information accuracy. It's their job to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible and any issues are resolved quickly and effectively. It's all done now a lot with electronic documents. Payments are done electronically. You don't get invoices anymore. Think about your own electronic banking. It's the business equivalent of that. You can do all kinds of purchases without actually ever sending any paper back and forth. Amazon's a clear example of that. So electronic document exchange via email, EDI, online marketplace, your own websites, your own ERP talking to their ERP using EDI when it goes in between the 2 companies is probably the way to do it. Electronic documents also facilitate tracking the PO's progress. Heck, you can track your Amazon order. You can track your I mean, tracking is important now. As soon as you put a barcode on something and scan it every time the status of the shipping changes, you can see where it is. I can see where my stuff is on production. I can probably see what boat it's on if it's coming from China, and probably see how far across the ocean it is. And every time it does that, it'll give me an anticipated delivery date, which could change too. But this is the marvelous new world where you have what we call visibility that you did not have before. If I was ordering stuff from China, tracking it when I first started working was impossible. You didn't know where it was. It was in transit. I mean, I might be able to call, it was even before you could send an email. I might have to call or telex them, which was pre-email stuff. Yeah, no, it shipped. Okay, so it's on the ocean. When's it going to arrive? The shipping company might have some idea about that. It was really fuzzy. Now it's like pretty accurate stuff. And you can see where your goods are all the time, and you can adjust your if you see there's going to be a delay, you can change your production schedule. Plain and simple. So procurement is critical to strengthening the supply chain. It's focused on those relationships with suppliers, and the modern way of doing it is not just focus on lowest price, but also bring service quality, capability, ease of doing business with, all those things into it. But let's not kid ourselves, as I've said before, at least 50% of it is still price. The relationship with the supplier and buyer is based on negotiations and open communications. So there's agreements. The agreements are designed like a prenuptial agreement to keep both parties honest. Those contracts should also have divorce clauses. Should you ever need to, one party decides, hey, this is not working, you're not behaving according to the prenuptial agreement, I want out. Emphasis on developing win-win relationships. You don't want to have a divorce that causes you to have to resource again. So really, you want these things to work out well, and that should be your efforts. Key procurement terms were also defined. We talked about make-buy. We talked about the key duties of purchasing departments. We talked about RFQ versus RFP and things of that nature. So that's the end of this presentation. Thank you for bearing with me. There's a lot of stuff in it. And we'll talk again soon.